Okay, Brian, so you got your wheat harvested, but it's a long time till we're going to plant another crop
Yep.
here. What are you going to do to protect your soils?
Well, it's not just soil protection. I guess when we start talking about this whole thing in wheat and after harvest, what do? We want to get into cover crops. We think it's one of the most underutilized technologies there is on the farm today. And you know, Darren, I even had to get notes out because I started writing down, well, let me think about all the reasons why I should use a cover crop. And there were so many, I didn't want to forget something.
Oh my goodness.
So,
okay, let's hear your list.
Here's my list. Okay, so you talk about soil protection, and erosion reduction was at the top of my list. So that was number one. Then it was increase soil organic matter. Capture, recycle, and redistribute nutrients in the soil profile. In other words, it makes nutrients more available to the next crop. Promote biological nitrogen fixation, weed suppression, provide supplemental hay or grazing. Use or conserve soil water. Now, it could go either way. You can either use it or you can conserve it depending on which cover crop you pick. Reduce soil compaction, salinity tolerance, attract beneficial insects, mycorrhizal fungi association. Plus, it's just fun. It's fun to have something growing out there.
All right, well, there's a lot of things on the list there. Now, let's talk about this list just a little bit, because when you've got all those different things, you certainly aren't going to get that out of just one plant, are you?
Yep. And that's the whole thing. Most farmers who are planting cover crops are putting together 2, 3, 4 different seeds, and they're planting that out there. And what I always tell farmers when I'm advising them on cover crops is, what's your number one goal, and start there and find the crop that is best to fill that number one goal. So let's say, for example, you had super high salt, high pH soil. You just want to get something growing out there, try to get something into production there at all. Well, then you might pick something like barley that has good tolerance.
That makes some sense, Brian, but wouldn't you just start with something really basic like, hey, you know what, we just had a grass crop out here, wheat.
Yep.
Why don't I just look for some broadleaves so I have different bugs, different diseases, all those things. I don't want to have the same thing out here, because what if you plant winter wheat again, which you're probably going to in this particular ground that we're on?
Well, it just depends. Okay, so let's say, for example, that with this wheat crop, my next crop was going to be soybeans. Well, then why would I want to put a broadleaf crop in when my next crop is going to be soybeans? The whole thing is, what we're trying to get out of this cover crop deal is at least a couple months of growth to fill these many different purposes that it might be, whether it's to prevent erosion or to try to get something into production in high salt ground, to use some water, to conserve water, whatever it is. We just want a couple months of growth, and then we're going to kill this stuff off, either with frost this fall, or we might kill it off with a herbicide.
Well, I guess the other thing too is you don't want to plant something that you can't kill. And I know we see a lot of times where we have a drought year or a flood year, and all of a sudden guys will say, wow, we're going to run short of forage to feed livestock. I need to plant something out there. And there are actually some neighbors of mine that planted some shatter cane back in the day because, oh, that was a good food source for the cattle. And wow, they fought shatter cane in that field for the next 20 years. So you do have to be cautious about what you are planting. Make sure it's something that you can control. And a lot of times you want to make sure that it doesn't go to seed. If you plant the right cover crop mix, work with a reputable firm, you can find something that yes, in my 60 days that I'm going to grow this crop out before I seed something else in there or before winter kills it off, it's not going to go to seed and I'm not going to have a problem next year.
Okay, when you talk about this reputable firm thing, what my opinion is you need to be talking to an agronomist. I mean, a good agronomist about what cover crops you're going to put in. Sometimes seed companies, they're just trying to sell whatever seed they have, whatever cover crop blend that they have. They don't even know necessarily how it's going to relate to you and to your particular soil. So just make sure you're doing a good job of that working with an agronomist.
All right, now let's get into some of the things, some of the reasons people don't use cover crops, Brian. One would be, all right, we're in South Dakota and it's really dry. If I plant another crop, it's just going to suck all the water out.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I always believed too. But when you stop and think about it a little bit, where is that water going? The water's going into the crop, and that crop's just going to stay there. We're not taking any grain off or anything in most cases. I mean, of course, if you want to feed it to livestock, that's a little different deal. But in our case, we're just going to leave it out in the field. And what we can actually do, especially with some of these very deep-rooted crops, and in just 2 or 3 months, we can get extremely deep roots down there. We can suck some water out from way down deep, get it up into the crop. Then when that crop dies off, we've got moisture that's actually relatively close to the soil. We're not overall going to remove moisture from the soil with the different crops that we might pick.
All right, well, what about nutrients? That's the other thing that we hear from a lot of guys is, well, you know, I don't want to take all the fertilizer out of my soil with this crop.
Yep, here again, if let's say you get a crop that you don't normally raise, it might be able to extract some extra nutrients that a wheat crop might not be able to get or a soybean crop might not be able to get. It can extract those nutrients, get it into the crop and making that crop. Well, when you leave that crop, that cover crop out in the field, you just destroy it, till it under, just let it die, kill it off, whatever it is, then you're going to have those nutrients pretty readily available when that residue breaks down. So it's actually going to help you in terms of nutrients, not hurt you.
Well, there's certainly many reasons why you may consider using a cover crop. We certainly feel it's one of the most underutilized farming techniques across the country. We think there's a lot of benefits there, and we think more people are going to do it in the coming years.
Well, we do think seeding a cover crop is a good thing to do, as long as it doesn't contain our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed coming up later in the show.